What I would like you guys to do is to help me give Scott Brinks a very warm welcome.
That's very kind. First of all, I need to say thanks to all of you that spoke in front of me. Like Michael said earlier, we didn't plan this, but each of us has walked right in to everybody else's sweet spot. What I want to do for the next few minutes is refocus us back on DOS's purpose and why we're trying to do what we do. So the CoFES theme this year is about coevolution. And Ken asked me, he heard a term that I coined a few years ago, actually about 20 years ago, and he wanted me to talk about it. So the term is, and I like oxymorons, the term is strategic incrementalism. Now, you all, I've heard the word strategy several times, and each one of the presentations prior to me has talked about how we work in pieces to accomplish our goal, okay? And years ago, I was trying to sell things or services. I'm in the logistics business, so all the things your software helps people make, I try to move. And of course, that's a whole nother piece that needs to be in the design that's not well enough. So I want to talk about the fact that sustainability and strategy belong together, as Stian talked about earlier. So let's first start about what's our purpose here. Coevolution, sustainable coevolution, is about interdependence, and it's about getting software, and I heard this earlier, software that'll put sustainability as a significant set of options, and then it pulls people into it, and that gets things to happen. What we're trying to do here, whoops, that didn't work. I'm looking for a mouse click. Ah. We're talking about human designed and built outcomes. How do we affect human designed and built outcomes? Whether that's building a product, a service, a value, it's how do we get the feedback between technology and those outcomes so that we can learn how to build it better next time and keep incrementally getting it better. So, Chris, who's not sitting there right now, mentioned earlier that our folks in the Nordic companies are really good. There's a Swedish professor that wrote an article about sustainability, and he mentioned what we need to be doing is keeping the future navigable. It needs to be accessible, and we need to be able to get there. Today, what we're finding is innovation is happening in very small steps, but the velocity is changing immensely. It is faster and faster and faster all the time. And if we look at what are we really talking about here, we're talking about knowledge and products. So we've got design and software, and we've got engineering and design and production to be able to work together and provide those feedbacks. And if you look at the study of human behavior and coevolution, there are real patterns about strategy, strategic choices, even down at the biology level, so that you can understand that we have choices to make, significant choices to make, strategic choices to make in order to impact those human-built outcomes. So if we're about making sustainable choices, we've got to make sure that sustainable is in the front of technology. Got to make sure that it is, so that pull can happen. You know, one of the things that Brad talks about on the COFES website is the fact we have leverage. This group has a leverage. This is a learning group, a knowledge group here. Okay? And you know, when the uninitiated ask me what I do coming to this conference, I've sort of laid out something. And for those of you that are deep in the software, this may not be meaningful. But to me, I try to say that I go to visit people who design the tools that designers use to design the future products that we don't know yet. They're designing tools to design things we don't know. That's pretty far-reaching. Now, if we ensure in this leverage community that we put sustainability in those tools, we'll get outcomes that are different. Okay? Studies show, if you look at coevolution and you look at technology and marketing and technology and healthcare, studies show that you change the software, innovation in the industry changes. It's a proven fact. There's a lot of information out there about that. Which is why, if we can get sustainability into designing the future, we might make the future accessible on a much greater scale. We want sustainable innovations, but we won't get sustainable innovations until sustainability is one of the significant plays inside of these software packages. We won't get it. So I have to ask you, if you're in the software business, how many options in your design tool lead to sustainable choices? Whether that's in materials or transportation or overall life cycle cost, where is all that? Because the more there is of it, the more we'll use it. Now, I brought these pictures because these are one of my favorite human-built outcomes from 2,250 years ago. I went and saw those about 60 days ago. And 8,000 of these things, and every single one of them is unique. But they were made in a manufacturing process that would have made Henry Ford look stupid. This was done in a complete manufactured environment, but each one of them is unique. Their hair's different, their face is different, their armor's different. Guess what? Their shoes are different. And guess what? Their shoes have a little tie on them. And the bows in the tie are different. 2,200 years ago. So, talk about simplicity. Technology, handmade out of clay. Okay, so let's talk a little about strategic incrementalism. It is systemic, so it is a large thing. You're looking at the big picture. We've talked about the need for that, but you can't implement in the big picture. You can't. How many times have you tried to sell something or talk to someone, and the first couple of steps, you got them, they're really into this. And when you tell them the end game, it's done. They're deer in the headlights, it's too expensive, they don't understand it, they don't believe it. So what I've learned, and for me, many years ago, the gorilla, I'll get to that in a minute, My first gorilla was Big Blue. Had a solution that in their supply chain, domestic supply chain, for their AS400s would save them $1 million a day, 365 days a year. But it wasn't the solution they thought they needed, because they didn't understand it. The gorilla only wants the banana. And sometimes that's all you can sell them, or give them, or provide to them, like your airport instead of the entire environment there. You've got to play that. Alice in Wonderland. It's strategic. What's the problem with Alice? When Alice meets the Cheshire Cat at the fork in the road, she asks him which way should she go. And he, being really smart, says, "Where are you going?" And she says, "I don't know." And his great response is, "It doesn't matter which way you go." How many times for sustainability and in decision making in companies do they make a decision they really don't know where they're going? If you put the tools in front of them, pull them into them, sustainability starts to become a direction and we increment them there. Yes?
Your earlier statement about trying to pull Big Blue along or any other large company, talk about the deer in the headlights. I think the issue becomes the people that you address are not prepared to hear that message. They're dealing with the pain they got now. So until you address the pain that, you know, I got a headache. Well, let me tell you about your stomach. No, I don't care. I got a headache. So until you've, shown the pain,
Of course.
and how to address it, they're not interested.
And that's how strategic incrementalism works. There's a lot of times that I know that your real problem is the stomach, but I can't talk to you. Even though I know it, I can't tell you about it. I know the direction we need to go, but I can only tell you the pieces that you connect to. If you've read Learning How to Learn, which Jack has taught me about, you realize that the moment you say something to someone that they either don't know, don't understand, or don't believe, or have a vested interest not to, you lost them. So you can only increment with them as far as they can comprehend. But I still have a strategy to try to get where I'm going, even though I know I can only climb the first 2 steps. That's what I mean by strategic incrementalism. So, but it's agile. You learn as you go. You make adjustments. You always realign to the strategy, but you do it in very small increments. And I put this term together years ago because I needed a name for what I was forced to do with a lot of my customers. I build global supply chains, but the problem is their ocean freight cost is too high. They really probably ought to not use as much ocean freight. They shouldn't have as much inventory, but I can't tell them that. I can only solve their ocean freight problem. But I have to know that when I solve the ocean freight problem, I'm creating a relationship that'll take me further. That's how I can get to the end strategy. We have to do that with sustainability. And the people in this room have the leverage because you're writing the software or using the software to design the future. So why here? You have the leverage. Learning versus imitation. The majority of innovation in this world comes from the learning community here, and then it's imitated. Pareto's are right. 80% of the folks are imitators. The 20% create 80% of the innovations. And we, in this room, the folks that design the tools, that design the future, have the learning and the leverage to make sure we increase the level imitation. That's what's going to get us there, because the masses aren't going to get it, but they'll imitate it. If it's the right thing to do, if it's cool, if we want to, be like this person, we want to go to that level of achievement. That's what gets them to do it. So, cultural learning, it's right here. Do we want to raise the average fitness? How do you get it? This learning community drives innovation that the imitation of the masses begins to assimilate. That's what we have to achieve. And the folks here that are in the software business designing the tools to design the future products have the leverage to do that better than anybody else I can think of. So, Mr. Newton said that innovation really is just I'm standing on a pyramid of midgets. Because innovations, there are very few things that happen that are immense game changers. They're all increments. Strategic incrementalism. Okay? We incrementally innovate. All the time. So, we have a choice. We can either have the tragedy of commons, or we can end up being a pyramid of midgets and get sustainability truly moved into the masses of products, services, and buildings that are being built out there. So, I just wanted to spend these few minutes by getting you to think a little bit about there's a lot of times that you're going to be looking at things that you can't tell people the end game. But you can get them started in a strategic direction. You can give Alice the chance to know which way she's going. Okay? Making the future navigable. This is where I pulled a lot of this stuff. These are my shoes. If you look here, there's 4 different types of shoes. See the bow on that one? It's not on that one. That one doesn't have a bow. 2,200 years ago. Made by hand. Unbelievable. Thank you. And that's how they did it. Questions, comments? Again, DOS is about conversation. I just try to get you to think a little different.
Well, you succeeded. And interestingly enough, I mean, the conversation we had just before you started, it brought us all to a pause, right? Thinking about the Petri dish and too many people and what we're doing. That's the big picture. That's what we all have to remain aware of. But that is what freezes people up. Like a deer in the headlights. They're frozen if you go there. And so that's why I think this strategic incrementalism is so important. And I'm guilty because I want to pound people over the head with this stuff, right? But that doesn't do me any good and it doesn't do them any good. So I think this notion is really important. Because look at what I'm really dealing with at the airport. It's the interface between 2 fossil fuel systems. It's the automobiles that are bringing people and the planes that are traveling people, and that particular airport is like 3 feet above current ocean sea level. And I think that the people that are out there working at that airport, they kind of get that too. And they want to do a net zero energy building, but there's only so many things they can do right now. So I think that strategic incrementalism is a very important concept for all of us. Other questions, thoughts?
Scott, I like that term a lot. And I would add strategic opportunism too, because so often when you want to do the incremental improvement, you have to be looking for, an opportunity that may not be along your strategic path, but you've got to grab it because you've got an audience that's paying attention, or you've got a business process you can solve, or in your case, a supply chain issue that you can address. But it's I kind of use a different analogy. Being trained as a visual artist. I say I have a strategic plan, but it's a jigsaw puzzle. And when I have an opportunity, I'm going to put these pieces into place, and then when the other opportunity comes along, I'll put these other pieces in place. So the process is messy, but there's a vision, and eventually the picture is going to get filled in. But it's the same.
Well, that's why.
It's a different way of saying the same thing.
It's why I set up there that part of the process is you learn. It's a journey, and you learn along the way. You know, I have also done some work in the government, and I found that 70 to 80% of the cost and time in government projects, which, by the way, 90+% are too long and over budget, but 70 to 80% of the cost and time that's wasted in government projects is trying to herd the cats back to the project plan. Instead of adjusting the plan and learning along the way and making it travel as long as you continue to understand what the end objective looks like. So you keep the strategy, but we're too often too married to the process and not allowing ourselves to learn and adjust.
Yeah. Where is the good point to exercise strategic incrementalism? And I probably didn't say it 2 or 3 times, but toward the end, there's a contention that business is not the place that can do it. It's a community or a locality where you can see a lot of the variables come together. You can begin to physically see. Whereas if you're a business and you're trying to market to over a broad area, you don't see. And if you're going to be smart, how do you help a community become more resilient or self-sustain? Now you begin to deal with a lot of human variables and all other variables.
One of the things I try to do when I'm trying to talk to folks about strategy and applying in increments is I tell a lot of young folks, take your thumb, put it under your chin, push up. Because invariably, when you're in the midst of a project, you've lost the size of the horizon, and you just can't see enough.
Scott's strategic incrementalism makes me discover that the COFES focus needs to be restated to what can we do to make the customers we should have more sustainable, which says, how do we get rid of the 50% of the customers that are a current drag, and how do we get the other bunch of customers we don't yet have? And the premise is that sustainability is the key to that. And if businesses don't do it, communities can't.
Correct.
Did you say communities can't?
Cannot.
Cannot.
By themselves.
By themselves.
So I agree with Doc, except the businesses can't be let out. They've got to get in there and get right.
Doc, respectfully, I disagree that businesses cannot do it. Businesses can do it, but in order for business to participate that way, they need to change their business model. That becomes the issue, is the nature of how business, or the majority of business, measures success as a business is cash flow. What did you bring in for the investor, as opposed to what did you do for the advancement of society? When you start measuring that as part of your strategic scorecard, behaviors in the enterprise change. Just like saying, oh, well, you're producing a product that destroys, an entire community. Well, suddenly when that's visible, people go, we're not investing there. So you've got to change that dialogue to say, here are factors that aren't ROI that we measure whether or not you should be allowed to participate in society.
Yeah. Stephen mentioned that when sustainability's got to be from C-level. It's got to be ingrained in the DNA of a company in order to get it done.
Increasingly, social license to operate is going to be utterly dependent on that.
Yes.
Chris?
On the subject of whether businesses can drive this or not. I think they can, but the rules need to change first, which is what was alluded to. And so it's, I think not, I was out for half an hour, I had a conf call, and called. But so maybe I missed something, but it seems to me we've not talked yet about government, but the rules come from that level. It's been proven in automotive, it's been proven in other ways, but it's been proven on very tiny, small little levels like emissions and stuff like that. But in the graph that was there before about the cost of design, the cost of producing it up to the societal cost. If a business would have to pay for the societal cost, that's a very simple thing to implement and it would dramatically change our world.
So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Peter, please.
I was going to say, one way maybe to get businesses more engaged in this was a little mini trend about 15 years ago in the new product development area of looking at strategy as the same way you look at financial options. And so the idea that you weren't quite sure, and it fits your incrementalism theme very well, you weren't quite sure whether infrared or wireless was the right way to do your controls, so you'd have the option of doing both. You'd invest in both. And in the same, I mean, literally right now, climate change could be explained as, okay, you don't believe in climate change, but wouldn't you like the option to be around here? And so just invest a little bit in some of these technologies that give you that option to take that path. So just, to me, the benefit of the option thing is, A, was a way that CEOs liked hearing about the discussion. Two is that once you got a University of Chicago PhD to explain why do you invest in this stuff, you know, people just fell by the wayside. And third, there really is something to this idea of there is uncertainty, and actually codifying the economic value of having an option is something there. So anyhow, just something to add to the excellent talk you gave.
Well, a couple of thoughts come to my mind, one of which is that our keynote speaker is going to be speaking about how businesses can actually structure themselves in a different way, which I believe is B corporations. And I understand that was a big part of something that got one of my chief executives very excited when he started learning about, I think it's Patagonia, and what their business model is and how they organize themselves as a B Corp in order to pull that off. Because I think that ultimately, and I've said this before at DOS in the past, that what we're dealing with is an economic system which is driving non-sustainable behavior. And voodoo economics that doesn't account for externalities. That's the, I think, one of the cruxes of the matter. Other thoughts? Okay, folks, you have been wonderful. Give yourself a big round of applause.